All right, we're live. Welcome to the Upper Hand Fantasy Podcast. This is Faraz and Zach. I'm here with Zach Rizzuto. Thanks everybody for waiting a couple minutes. I've been traveling over the last couple of days, so things have been kind of crazy. But we're back to it today on Thursday. Um, if you guys didn't know, I do have a day job. I do have something else going on outside of Upper Hand Fantasy. Trying to make Upper Hand Fantasy my full time thing, but we're almost there. But still got to kind of I do have some obligations I got to take care of. Still got a family,
Yeah.
still got to do all that stuff. But we're back. We're back here. We're gonna go over the Thursday night football game tonight. We're gonna go over a couple pieces of news, and we're gonna go over quarterback rankings, and we are gonna go over running back rankings this week. For this week, Zach, I missed you, man.
Yeah.
No
What's up?
podcast, no podcast yesterday, but we did have the trade targets and buys and sells up over on the Instagram. So I hope you guys caught that with a little bit of a blurb for each of those players. But yeah, man, how you doing?
I'm doing good. It's been odd scheduling. I'm so used to having the podcast every day, so I had a little bit extra time on my hands, and it was a decent little break. But I'm happy to be back. Talking about fantasy football again.
There's not too many breaks, during the fantasy football
No,
season.
no.
It wasn't that it didn't feel like a break for me because I felt like
Well, yeah,
uh,
for you,
I was juggling, a
right?
lot of things this week. But yeah, man, it is what it is. But let's get right into it. It's not a whole bunch of news. There's not like too many injuries going in, to the week. Obviously, we have the Mike Evans news, that he was suspended. That suspension has been upheld.
Yeah,
So don't expect to have him in your lineup this week. Um, let's see. We have a couple other players. Rondell Moore still not practicing. And that was Wednesday. We'll see what happens this week. But if Rondell Moore doesn't play this week, you go
yeah,
ahead and fire up Greg Dortch once again as a PPR flex play. He has got it done over the last 2 weeks for you if he was in your lineup. James Conner isn't practicing yet. We'll see what happens on Thursday and Friday. He's listed as day to day right now. Doesn't seem like a bad ankle injury, but if he doesn't go, I think between Dow Williams and Chase Edmonds, I think Dow Williams would be the play just because he did edge out Benjamin in a few of the categories. They were sharing each of the roles, like they were sharing early down snaps and rushes. They were sharing passing down snaps and 2 minute in the 2 minute offense. But the only thing that we're not sharing was the goal line role, and Darrell Williams got all of those goal line snaps, and there was a bunch of them too. So
right.
he would be my preferred play. And if James Conner doesn't play, I would probably have him ranked as like a high end RB3.
Yeah, I
Flex
think
play.
that's fair. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Let's see. I don't think there's that much else, to be honest with you. There aren't that many injuries. Now, let me ask you this: like, if Mike Evans, isn't playing this week,
Yeah.
Julio Jones still isn't practicing.
Who?
They
Yeah.
don't really
Who's
have
Tom Brady
anybody
throwing
else.
to? Right.
Is it Russell Gage? Now, the Bucks did sign
Cole Beasley.
a COVID boy. Oh yeah, Cole Beasley. Cole Beasley to
You mispronounced Cole. He's
sorry
a COVID boy.
to the practice squad with the expectations of him being elevated to the active roster, right?
Yeah.
And there is a chance that he ends up as their primary slot receiver, while Chris Godwin is out, and we'll see how long Chris Godwin's out for. But I would assume maybe another week or two, right after this
Right.
week. So I don't know how quickly he's going to get acclimated, but it seems like he'll probably be put in rather quickly, probably as soon as this week, just because
Yeah.
of all the receivers that they have banged up, especially if Julio's out.
Yeah.
Gage did run a route on almost every drop back last week, but it wasn't pretty. He did lead the
No.
team in catches, but he didn't get a bunch of yards. I think Gage will probably still be just a PPR flex play at best, even though he likely will get the majority of target share.
Yeah, I think that's a fair analysis. And with all the receivers banged up, it might be Leonard Fournette's time. This might be a really good week for him to get peppered with targets if he plays. Rashad White might be able to get a little extra work if the targets aren't going to receivers because, outside of that we mentioned they signed Cole Beasley, they have Scotty Miller. Is that who they have? They have
Yep.
They have Cameron Brate, but he hasn't really showed up.
And then they have Rashad Perriman too, and that's about it.
And the odd thing is, the Buccaneers offense has kind of been out of sorts. And it's weird to say that because, Tom Brady is the quarterback, but they haven't been fantastic from a fantasy production standpoint. I do expect that to get better, But in this kind of game, I think that I think Leonard Fournette stands to see the most benefit out of Mike Evans being out. Obviously, Mike Evans will be back again next week, so we can gauge it then. But Russell Gage, I think you're right. I don't see his ceiling going very high at this point because even with targets, he hasn't been too super efficient, too uber productive. Um, it's a rough situation for Tom Brady because he's been short wide receivers the whole season so far. We won't be able to get a good read on him or how his fantasy production is going to be until he gets more of his weapons back.
Yeah, no, I'm with you on that. Hunter Renfro's in the concussion protocol, so keep that in mind. He might not play this week. Alvin Kamara, he is practicing. He practiced on Wednesday. It's a great sign for him to suit up this week after missing 1 week. Keenan Allen was participating in individual work, so there's a chance that he's back this week. And Justin Herbert, some good news on him. There was a report, talking about him kind of looking like himself and him coming into the facility and throwing and weightlifting and doing those type of things that, despite the I think what was his injury? It was a
rib cartilage injury.
Yeah, cartilage fracture. No, it wasn't a fracture. No, that's not.
I think they called it something like a rib cartilage fracture.
Something.
It wasn't
like
a bone. It was a cartilage.
Yeah,
which apparently is super painful.
Yes. So it seems like a pain management issue. He'll probably be shot up a ton before and during the game. So he should be good to go this week. That's what it's looking like.
Yeah.
So that's good news for everybody who has Justin Herbert, everyone who has Mike Williams, and Keenan Allen. There's a possibility that he's back this week.
Yeah.
Jerry Jeudy's not practicing yet either. Joe Flacco's going to play this week. Zach Wilson might be back week 4, and we'll see how that works out with him. Michael Pittman, he did return to practice on Wednesday as well. So looking good for him to get started. He started the week on the right note. All right. Let's get into the Thursday night football game. We got the Steelers at the Browns. I've been looking forward to this matchup since the season started. Just kidding. Browns favored by 4.5 points. The over-under on this game is 38.5. So Vegas is not.
Sounds like quite a game.
Vegas is not expecting a lot of scoring in this one. So on the Steelers side, I think Najee Harris, he gets a bit of an upgrade over where I had him going into last week. He looked fine to me. Jaylen Warren did play a lot more than he would normally play. Najee still had 71% of snaps, though. He ran around on more than 50% of dropbacks. So he'll be fine. I have him as a high in RB2 this week, and we'll see those rankings in a bit, despite the bad offense. So I think overall downgrade for Najee from where he was being drafted. But it was pretty scary with him going into last week and the concerns around his foot. So it might not be over when it comes to that. But for now, things are looking okay.
Yeah, I think so. Steelers offense is not anything I'm really excited about going into this. The Browns defense isn't bad. It's not awesome. I think they're allowing, some of the most points to fantasy wide receivers right now at this point, but it's only been 2 weeks, so we'll see how that goes. Najee Harris, you want to start him. I don't think there's any reason you don't start him, even though he hasn't been terribly productive. Deontay Johnson, I like him to get in the end zone this week. I feel like if anybody's going to be scoring touchdowns, it's going to be him. He hasn't found the end zone yet, but he's gotten double-digit targets 2 weeks in a row, and it's actually responding to someone in the comments right before this. He was between Deontay and I forget who it was. If I look at the chat, it was Deontay Johnson or Damian Pierce, which that one was pretty easy for me. Deontay Johnson because of his workload, but it's
especially in a PPR league.
Yeah, absolutely, especially if it's PPR, like you said. Damian Pierce just doesn't have the volume just yet. I just kind of got off track right there. That's my bad.
No, that's fine. No, that's good context. 30% target share, for him each of the first 2 weeks. He might have a bit of a tough matchup with Denzel Ward on him. Ward doesn't really shadow, but the last time he did shadow, it was last year against Deontay Johnson. And Ward,
that's true.
And Ward allowed Deontay to catch 8 balls, but it only went for 31 yards. So keep that in mind. I don't know that Deontay Johnson has quite the ceiling this week. I think Damian Pierce probably has a higher ceiling than him. But in terms of a floor play in PPR, it's probably Deontay. Pat Freiermuth, he should be in lineups. He's the tight end 6 over the first 2 weeks. And when tight end pick'ems are slim, keep those guys in your lineup.
Yeah.
And I think that's about it for the Steelers. If George Pickens is available, by the way, in your league, and you play on Yahoo or you play on Sleeper or on a platform where in your league you're allowed to drop bench players after they play. Um, like for example, if he plays on Thursday night and he is on your bench, you can drop him after the game, during the game, on Friday, right? By the way,
Yeah.
that's the way to play. It's more fun.
Yeah.
If that's the case, I'd pick him up before the game tonight. If Jalen Warren is available on your waiver wire, you're in that type of league, I would pick him up, and drop him after the game. If Najee makes it out of the game, okay, just drop him, pick up somebody else, do the same thing up until Sunday. If that happens again, do the same thing on Monday night. And you're probably gonna be dropping that player anyway for waivers, as they roll around during the week next week. Same thing with George Pickens. Now, there's a chance that Kenny Pickett comes in at some point, right? Like
Yeah.
if Trubisky continues to struggle, and if that happens, we can potentially see a Pickett to Pickens combination, right? It has a nice little ring to it.
Yeah.
And they've been doing their thing in the preseason. And I think Pickens is a very talented wide receiver, and we could see the target share kind of even out a little bit, and we could see some preferential treatment, moving around a little bit. Obviously, Deontay's going to get his because he's that dude. And that's why that's why he had a 30% target share each of the first 2 weeks. It sucks that a talent like him is being wasted right now. And I'm hoping that Trubisky can kind of step it up. I think he's better than he's looked over the first 2 weeks. But
Right.
he has not looked good so far.
No,
Now, go ahead.
I think Trubisky will step it up. If he doesn't, I don't have a problem with Kenny Pickett coming in. I think they're about the same. They'll perform the same function as Steelers. Offense is going to look very similar, but I think honestly, if Trubisky keeps playing the way he has, Kenny Pickett might actually have more upside.
Oh yeah, I
might
agree with
offer
that.
more upside for the entire offense overall.
I'm with you. And if you have anybody on this offense, you do hope that Kenny Pickett comes in.
Yeah.
Straight up. So on the Brown side, you're starting Nick Chubb, obviously. I have him as a low-end RB1 this week. No reason to think this will turn into a negative game script for him. Kareem Hunt is a low-end RB2 with upside for me. There's a good chance that he can rack up some volume as well. If this game, if they go up in this game or if it stays close. Amari Cooper had a big day last week. 37% target share, 64% of the air yard share. That led to a lot of production. So I'll have him in my lineup as a wide receiver 3. I would like to see that target share, be consistent. Amari Cooper has never been a high target share type of guy. He's always been around 20, 21%. So, if you can be at 25% or higher this year, or, after 1 week of doing it, I think that'll be a great sign for him. The chances aren't high that happens and continues throughout the whole season, but he's the only guy there, right? However, in week 1, we did see all the target share and air yards go elsewhere. So just keep that in mind. I wouldn't overvalue what he did last week, but I think solid wide receiver 3 this week.
Yeah, definitely. And that's kind of the problem that Amari Cooper ran into the whole time he was with Dallas. He never got a ton of targets. He was efficient with his targets, but he never really got that many targets. And you're kind of getting a taste of that already with the Browns, where he had very minimal production in week 1, and now suddenly he explodes in week 2. I wouldn't expect either of those to continue. I think that's going to settle kind of right in the middle. I see 12, 15 points this week, a couple catches. If he gets in the end zone, that's what's going to make him a good value this week, a good play. If he doesn't, then you're kind of looking at, I think a flex. I mean, wide receiver 3, he's a good wide receiver 3, but I don't see him going much higher. I don't think he's going to finish as wide receiver 2 this week. I don't expect much offensive production really at all in this game. It's not really one that you're circling on your calendar, like you said, for offensive production. But I think Cooper, he'll be fine. He's going to see some work, and that should make him fantasy relevant enough that he's not sitting on your bench.
Yes, exactly. David Njoku, I think he's a borderline tight end 1. 82% route participation last week, 19% target share. That's good enough for me to have him in your lineup if you're in need at the position.
Yeah.
All right. Let's get into the quarterback. Yeah, let's get right into the quarterback rankings here. I'm going to share my screen so you guys can see what I have up. Let's see here. That's that one. Okay, boom. All right. No surprise that I have Josh Allen at number 1 and Jalen Hurts at number 2. That seems pretty locked in right now. Doesn't really matter what the matchups look like. But Jalen Hurts, last week, man, looking good. He looked good
Yeah.
in the pass game. He looked good. Obviously running the ball. He's a legit dual threat at this point, and he has the weapons. So there's a lot of different ways that Jalen Hurts can get it done for you. So it's looking good for him. So he's locked in. Right behind Josh Allen, followed by Patrick Mahomes at 3, Lamar Jackson at 4. I had Justin Herbert at 5, despite the rib issue.
Yeah.
I think it seems like he's going to be okay. Doesn't look to be struggling or anything like that in practice. Or in the facility. There's no reports of that. In fact, the reports are the opposite right now. So looking good for him. Yeah, Kyler Murray. His offense hasn't looked great, right?
Yeah.
Over the first 2 weeks of the season. They kind of got it together to win that game late in week 2, but in week 1 and in week 1 especially, it was looking bad. However, Kyler Murray still got it done for fantasy. He
Yeah.
still reached the threshold that we're all looking for a fantasy quarterback. So, we haven't seen Murray's ceiling just yet. So, that's a good sign for Murray. Despite the bad offensive showings for this team,
Yeah.
he still got it done.
Yeah, definitely. So with Kyler Murray, we've seen his offense just really be abysmal. And then they picked up, like you said, at the end of the second game that they played. And Kyler Murray he benefited from that. But he was also good in week 1. He's produced despite the offense being bad. And that kind of goes along with, the offense is bad right now. Is as these weapons start coming back, as Rondale Moore comes back, as DeAndre Hopkins returns in a few weeks, the offense is only going to get better. And if Kyler Murray's already scoring 20, 25 points, a week, just with the weapons that he has, Greg Dortch, like you said, there's no reason to think as they come back that he's not going to get better. I think his ceiling, like you said, we haven't seen it yet. I think he's really going to shoot up rankings. Clearly, it's not him that's causing the offense to be bad. I mean, if you watch the end of the game last week, he was making everything happen at the goal line on the 2-point conversions. It was just, a Kyler Murray clinic. So I think 6 is good for now, but I wouldn't be surprised we see Kyler Murray moving up the ranks. If you have anybody panicking, I don't think anybody's panicking on Kyler Murray, but if anybody's not as high on Kyler Murray as they were coming into the season, maybe look at taking advantage of that and getting in and getting some Kyler Murray stock, because he's gonna blow up. He's gonna be really good this season. As long as we don't see that typical fall off from the Cardinals halfway through the season.
Yeah, no, I think he's pretty aware of it. He might just end up playing Call of Duty in the offseason.
Yeah, maybe.
That's what I would hope for.
Yeah.
The thing with Kyler is this, like, right now we haven't seen his ceiling. You can trade for him. If you have like a Russell Wilson, or if you have like a Aaron Rodgers or someone like that, and you're struggling at the quarterback position, you might want to, take a look at Kyler Murray, because, he hasn't had those 30-point games yet. And he's definitely, is going to happen at some point, right? He doesn't have DeAndre Hopkins, right? He has Hollywood Brown. He doesn't have Rondell Moore yet, right? So, and James Conner's banged up. So he doesn't have all of his weapons right now, and he's still getting it done, which
Yeah.
shows me that, the ceiling, is coming.
Yeah.
Right. So he's somebody that I'll be looking at, who's not necessarily viewed as a high-end fantasy quarterback right now. So he's somebody that I would be, kind of looking at if I want to, dip my toes into that high-end quarterback, stratosphere.
Yeah, definitely.
I got Joe Burrow at 7 here, Matthew Stafford at 8. Now let me ask you about Joe Burrow. The Bengals offense, that offensive line, they made improvements, in the offseason. So, we're thinking that, things are going to be looking okay. But over the first couple of games, hasn't looked great.
No.
So, and that's part of the reason why Joe Burrow, has struggled a little bit. He hasn't been absolutely terrible for fantasy. I mean, just remember, like last year, he wasn't amazing for fantasy, right? He wasn't a quarterback 1 on a per game basis. But obviously we're expecting a step forward this year. Is Joe Burrow somebody you're looking at just every week start? You're going to have him in your lineup no matter what the matchup?
Yeah. And, it seems sketchy to have it that way right now. He had an excellent stretch at the end of the season last season, going into the playoffs up until the Super Bowl. And we saw what peak Joe Burrow can look like. I'm not going to make excuses for the Bengals offensive line because it has been terrible, but I will say this. They were thrown completely into the fire. Just this new hodgepodge free agent line that they built was thrown completely into the fire, facing TJ Watt in week 1 and Micah Parsons in week 2.
Yeah.
The Jets are much more manageable up front. I think this is a good time for the Bengals offensive line to start gelling, and we could see Joe Burrow finally have that get right game that we thought he would have last week against Dallas. Dallas's defense isn't anything to sneeze at because of Micah Parsons. There's no Micah Parsons on the Jets. The Jets have been in 2 high-scoring games. I think that Joe Burrow has a chance to really get right. The whole Bengals offense has a chance to get right. So I don't have any problem. I think they're going to get right back to where they were last season. He's an every week start. He doesn't have upside like guys like Lamar, even Justin Herbert, Kyler Murray, but he's a good start if you don't he's the edge. He's like the border of that high end QB territory.
Right, right. And I have Matthew Stafford here at 8 going up against Arizona. He threw 3 touchdowns last week, also threw 2 interceptions. But, I think this is one of those matchups where you're looking at, okay, I think Matt Stafford can do some things here. And, he could potentially have that. He had a couple of those high ceiling games last year. Going into Arizona, I think this is going to be one of them.
Yeah, no, I like this one to be high scoring.
I am glad that Allen Robinson was able to make his way back, into fantasy relevance last week. He almost had that second touchdown as well. Everybody was playing except the refs. The refs blew the whistle, and the game, they kind of brought that back.
Right.
But he almost had 2 touchdowns, so he is. They are looking to use him. They are, bringing him back into the game plan, and that's great news for anyone who drafted Allen Robinson. So the fact that he has that 2 touchdown type of upside, on a per game basis, that's good news to me. And that's obviously great news for Matthew Stafford. So, right now it's looking like, Cooper Kupp, Tyler Higbee, and Allen Robinson as his 3 main targets.
Right.
We'll see how that evolves over the season. But for now, I think this is a good matchup for him, and I'll be happy to start him this week.
Go ahead.
Sorry.
And just remember that last week it took Robert Woods. Last year, it took Robert Woods a few weeks to get started and actually start to get the targets going his way. Obviously he got injured and that got cut off, but it could be the same case with Allen Robinson. Matthew Stafford comes out of the gate of the season, hasn't played all off season. The first few weeks, he's going to key in on Cooper Kupp, the guy he has the best connection with. That's no surprise. Allen Robinson's going to be just fine.
Yeah. Now I have Kirk Cousins at 9, and I have Carson Wentz at 10. And normally I would have Carson Wentz a little bit higher. Just because of the way that these guys are playing on offense. Like I just want to I just want to talk about that real quick and what these guys are doing. The way that they're passing the ball is awesome. They have 3 wide receivers on the field, on almost every single play. They are passing the ball in every situation, whether they're leading, whether they're behind, whether
By
they're
22 points to the Lions.
whether they're close, they're passing the ball, and they have the weapons. So, and the fact that their play action rate, is close to 50% is what you want to hear. However, going up against Philly, right? And Philly, this is the revenge game. However, Philly's defense, has looked solid, and this team overall has looked really good. So, this might be a little bit of a tough matchup. He is playing them at home, so that's good, but a little bit of a tough matchup there. Kirk Cousins, on the other hand, going up against Detroit, chances are that this is going to be a high scoring game. That would be my guess. And I think this is a nice little bounce back for Kirk after having a terrible week on Monday night. He won't be playing, in the bright lights this week, so he should be fine.
Yeah, no, that's the kryptonite to Kirk Cousins. It's Monday night. Don't start Kirk Cousins on a Monday night, or really even any primetime game. That's just how it goes. But 1 o'clock has proven to be pretty good for the Vikings. He's much better there. Justin Jefferson was oddly quiet against the Eagles, and that's one thing. You talk about Carson Wentz. They do have to deal with Darius Slay, who's balling out right now. So he shut down Justin Jefferson. That's the connection I was making. But the Lions don't have Darius Slay, even though they used to. They no longer have Darius Slay. He's on the Eagles now. So Kirk Cousins is going to be fine. I think Kirk Cousins has much better. A much safer floor in Carson Wentz. Carson Wentz could easily have a bad day against the Eagles. I could see that happening. Those storylines coming out Monday. So I think that these 2 rankings, Cousins above Wentz, is the move.
As much as Wentz wants to, get some revenge against his former team, it might not, work out so well.
Well, it's funny because he's going in there and he has probably his best supporting cast in his whole career. And he's going back to the place where they gave him nothing. Alshon Jeffrey and those guys.
It's true. And, his team made the Super Bowl, but
not
put him back in.
Yeah.
Derek Carr, I have him at number 11 here, going up against Tennessee. Decent matchup there followed by Jared Goff at number 12. Yes, I actually ranked Jared Goff as a top 12 quarterback this week above Russell Wilson. I have Russell Wilson at 14, who's been quite disappointing.
Yeah.
And I had Jameis Winston at 13. So I had Derek Carr at 11, Jared Goff at 12, followed by Jameis, followed by Russ. And let's talk about Russ real quick, man. Russ, the dude, I don't know, man. Like he is not looking great as of right now, right? Obviously, new
No.
team, new weapons. He might be missing Jerry Jeudy this week. He has Courtland Sutton as his guy. Albert O, I think he had 2 targets, no catches last week.
Yeah.
I dropped his ass with the quickness in one of our leagues. Couldn't wait to drop his ass.
Yeah.
But yeah, man, it's starting out slow for Russ. What are you making of this situation? And to me, it's like he went from a situation like, this is gonna sound funny because everybody knows how much I hate Pete Carroll.
Yeah.
I'm kind of missing Pete Carroll right now.
Right. Well, it's very early, but the onus I think falls on Nathaniel Hackett right now because he has not been a good coach, and I don't want to, chalk it all up to Nathaniel Hackett in Denver being the problem. Russell Wilson has not looked like the Russell Wilson that we expected to see or have come to know and love. He's had trouble hitting the receivers. I mean, I forget he completed like 7 of 17 or 18 passes to open the game last week against the Texans. It was like, that's not what you want to see at all from Russell Wilson. It's just really been a surprise. I think this might be one of the biggest surprises of fantasy this season so far.
He was at home against Houston.
Right.
Completed 14 of 31 for 219 and
right.
So it's
and when your home crowd is booing you 2 weeks in, that's pretty bad. I mean, the offense has looked anemic, which is a big problem. I mean, Courtland Sutton had himself a decent day. Javonte Williams was all right, but we were expecting a lot more from Russell Wilson. He did kind of show shades of this underperformance, I think, towards the end of last season in Seattle. I don't think anybody expected that to carry over into this season because it was just a bad situation there in Seattle. But, it has. So for me, I'm not really even sure Russell Wilson is my every week starter right now until he puts things together. I'd have more confidence. Like, I'm looking at this list. I'd have more confidence putting maybe Tom Brady in. I'd have more confidence with Jameis Winston. And Tua, he popped off. You don't want to overreact to that. But I was actually a pretty big fan of Tua at his price, the whole offseason. So I'd be okay with him. Until further notice, I have trouble ranking him anything higher as anything higher than maybe a solid QB2 right now each week.
I hear that. I don't want to overreact too, but like, for example, so I have Tua at 15, right? Yeah. And he's going up against Buffalo. All right. And that's my thing with him. I think Russ will have a better day than Tua this week against San Francisco at home. I do. Even if he does miss Jerry Jeudy, I think they kind of get it together. They have Javonte. Hopefully they use guys like Albert O and kind of get it together. But Tua, against Buffalo, that's a little bit of a tougher matchup. He obviously has the weapons. Tua wasn't amazing in week 1, right, against New England.
No.
He obviously did his thing last week in a big way. He made up for it. He made up for it. Like, he had 3 games worth of production, in that game last week.
I bet there were fantasy managers that saw what Tua put up in week 1 and put him on their bench in week 2 just to have that happen. I couldn't imagine that happening to me.
Like, yeah. If that happened to me, man, I'd quit. You wouldn't see me on this live stream anymore. But you mentioned Tom Brady at 7. I have him at 17. Dude, I can't start Tom Brady right now. Like, he's the offense is not looking good. He doesn't have any of his weapons. Like, I'm steering clear of that right now until he gets all of his guys back. And it just hasn't looked good. And he's getting frustrated. He's in that Aaron Rodgers situation right now where he doesn't have anybody to throw the ball to, right? Yeah. He has his running backs and that's it. At least Russell Gage, maybe he can get him the ball, but Russell Gage isn't really like a playmaker, right? Like he's used to playmakers, right? He has, Chris Godwin and Mike Evans and those guys. Like, those guys are playmakers. So yeah, even him, like, I've a lot of hesitancy. And we talked about Jared Goff, right? Jared Goff has some weapons, right? He has Amon-Ra St. Brown.
Oh yeah.
He has T.J. Hawkinson. He has DJ Chark. Who am I missing? He has DeAndre Swift. He's even using his ancillary wide receivers as well. So, there's a lot to go around there. And we talked about, this Vikings game, between them. Like, it could be a high scoring game between those two teams. It could be fireworks in that game. So, And let me actually take a quick look at what the actually I don't even have it
The
up,
over
but
under.
I will pull it up right now. And if I'm not mistaken, I think that game was at like 48 or 49.
Yeah.
But I'll pull that up in a second.
The thing about the Lions, Jared Goff, he's kind of been tasked with serving the same role as he did with the Rams back when they were good, which is
Yeah.
just game manage with a ton of elite talent around you. When you had Todd Gurley, when you had Robert Woods, Cooper Kupp, they were loaded on offense. Now Jared Goff, he is playing behind one of the best offensive lines in the league. He has DeAndre Swift, he has Jamal Williams, he has Amon St. Brown, who looks like this year's Cooper Kupp. So all he has to do is just distribute the ball, hand the ball off to DeAndre Swift and Jamal Williams. He's in a good situation where he doesn't have to do much to produce, where he might be locked in for 16 to 20 points every week because he's throwing 2 touchdowns a week, with the chance to throw more. Like he seems to have cleaned up a lot of issues. He doesn't have upside like the top guys, but he could easily serve really well for you each
Oh
week.
yeah.
The offense is so much more improved, and not to mention the defense. Aiden Hutchinson looks like the real deal after last week. But
Oh yeah.
this team's going to be much
They
more
have one of
competitive.
the best offensive lines in the league as well, right? And
Yeah,
that
I
definitely
mentioned that.
helps.
Yeah.
Oh, you did. Sorry.
Yeah, no, I did. It's fine. But it's true. Like it's worth mentioning twice because the offensive line really it drives this offense, and it's really changed it from last season. And Dan Campbell, you gotta love Dan Campbell.
Did you also mention that this is kind of like his role with the Rams? Did you mention that too?
Yeah, something like that. I
You
think
did.
I did. And then did I mention that he's handing the ball off to DeAndre Swift?
So I did say that I thought this game was at 48-49 over under. It's actually at 53.
Yeah, okay.
So this is one of the highest over unders for the week. So yeah, play golf. Put him in your lineup.
Definitely.
Which
I
had
really
Marcus
weird.
Mariota.
It sounds weird coming out of our mouths.
It is.
Golf over Wilson, easy peasy.
Yeah. Didn't really talk about Jameis Winston going up against Carolina. He does have a broken back right now, but he's toughing it out right now, and he has the weapons. Chris Olave seems like he's about to break out very soon. With the amount of opportunity that he had last year, his weighted opportunity was absolutely ridiculous. He had more than 300 air yards in week 2. Obviously he has Michael Thomas, he has Jarvis Landry, he has Alvin Kamara hopefully coming back this week. So I think Jameis Winston, he's set up for success, and I think I'd rather start him right now over Russ. Let's see. Marcus Mariota at 16. It's not a great pass-friendly offense there, but he is getting those design rushes, which is what you want to see. It's not an ideal offense, but at least he's locking on to somebody. He's not locking on to Pitts, that's for sure. But he is, locking on to Drake London. Now, we did see his rushing attempts, kind of go down last week in terms of like his designed rushing attempts. We want to see that go back up, before you feel like fully confident to put him in your lineup. He's a QB2 right now. In QB1 leagues, it's kind of tough.
That was, I think, largely because they were down big very early on in the game, and they just had to throw their way back into the game. He'll have much more success running the ball. 6 attempts is still, it's not what you want out of Mariota, but for other quarterbacks, like 6 attempts, like that's a lot. Obviously, it's not what you want for fantasy, but I think he'll be much better this week. It's a much more winnable matchup against Seattle.
Yeah, I mean, he had a solid floor in a 4-point touchdown league. He had 15 points last week. He had almost 20 points in week 1. So
yeah,
Mariota, as long as he's a starter there, he's going to have those design rushing attempts. And even if Desmond Ridder ever comes in, like he'll probably have the same type of usage too.
That's kind of what I think. I think they're very similar quarterbacks.
Yeah. Okay, so then I had Aaron Rodgers at 18. With his lack of weapons, he did have Lazard come back, but he also didn't command any target share. He ended up with the touchdown, but
not much.
Whatever, not much else. Yeah. Okay. I had Joe Flacco at 19 and Jimmy Garoppolo at 20. Do these two guys stand out to you at all in terms of Joe Flacco had 4 touchdowns last week?
Mm-hmm.
No picks. You mentioned that a lot of their games have been high scoring. I can see this game, kind of getting up there a little bit. What do you think about Joe Flacco and Jimmy G, as potential streaming options? Obviously, Jimmy G coming in for Trey Lance after that injury. Do these guys are these guys appropriately ranked for you, or do you think they should be a little bit higher over guys like Aaron Rodgers, Tom Brady, and Mariota?
I think they're appropriately ranked. I'm looking at it. You talk about Tom Brady. You kind of talked me off of Tom Brady now, and I'm thinking like maybe Joe Flacco could move up. Leave
Yeah.
Aaron Rodgers where he is, just swap Brady and Flacco.
Okay.
That could be. And the only reason with Flacco is he's throwing 50 or 60 passes a game.
Right.
So
Exactly.
you're
And he
bound
has
to.
he does have some weapons,
Yeah, no,
right?
he has
Like
very good weapons.
he has Elijah Moore, he has Garrett Wilson, he has Corey Davis, he has these running backs, and so it's not, and they're also running 3 wide receivers a ton. Braxton Berrios, he's coming on the field too. So
Yeah.
I feel like this is like, if you're looking at a top 4 in terms of wide receivers in the league, this is like kind of up there.
Yeah.
In terms
definitely.
of a top 4, wide receiver core.
If you picked up Joe Flacco, you're really feeling vindication right now because he's done very well for you in fantasy the first 2 weeks. I think he'll continue that against Cincinnati. Their defense isn't anything to behold, but he'll have to keep up with the Bengals offense, who I said I've picked to get back on track. Like you said, he has the weapons.
That's a good pick. That's a good pick right there for the Bengals offense to get back on track. I like that. I like that pick.
So he has the weapons though, and if he's playing from behind again, that's good news. And if you picked up Jimmy Garoppolo, there's probably a massive power shift in your league because whoever had Trey Lance may not have gotten their hands on Jimmy Garoppolo, and now they're down a quarterback. I think Jimmy Garoppolo is a good streamer. The thing for me with Jimmy Garoppolo, the storyline is less of Jimmy Garoppolo coming back and producing. It's more, are we going to see the Debo of old? Because that's who powered him last season. So that's one thing I'm looking at. I think Jimmy Garoppolo is going to be fine. I would have him lower than Joe Flacco at this point. So I think that's fair. 19 and 20. I think that's good back to back.
All right. Awesome. All right. Let's get into the running back rankings. Still have Christian McCaffrey at number 1 here. Okay. And, Jonathan Taylor at number 2. If Jonathan Taylor had a big week too, then this would be a little bit more questionable. But honestly, the reason why I still have CMC at number 1 is because he's been getting it done, but he has not reached anywhere close to his ceiling yet, right?
Yeah.
His usage hasn't been, like what we've seen in terms of targets over the first 2 weeks. I think that's going to correct itself eventually because he is still getting insane type of utilization, right?
Yeah.
If you look at what he's doing right now, 91% of snaps in week 2, 60, he's running around on 60-70% of dropbacks, which is insane. Still getting right around 20%, 21% of targets over the first 2 weeks, which is fine, but we're used to him seeing more than that as a running back. So we need the Panthers to pass the ball more overall, and then Christian McCaffrey should get his at the end of the day. So, we've kind of gone into the fourth quarter in these games with Christian McCaffrey getting like only 2 targets by then. I think that's something that's a glaring mistake, right?
Mm-hmm.
And if you're a competent head coach, but they do have Matt Rule, so
might need to rethink that one.
If you're a competent head coach, you kind of look at that and say like, all right, we got to get the ball in our playmakers' hands, and I'm hoping that that's what they do. So I still have Christian McCaffrey at number 1 here, JT at number 2. Do you have any issues with that?
No, and that's kind of the way it has to be. You could say, oh, maybe Dalvin Cook moves up because he has usage. No, he's produced just like Christian McCaffrey, I think. Saquon had a good week 1, not really week 2. DeAndre Swift had 2 good weeks, but he was a little banged up already. It's tough to rank anybody higher. There's no clear-cut running back so far, which is kind of surprising. I figured Christian McCaffrey and Jonathan Taylor would do that, like they were last year. Not that Christian McCaffrey was on Jonathan Taylor's level in terms of production, but I thought this would be much more separated than it is.
Yeah,
because all of these guys are liable to finish, as the RB1 each week now, as things stand.
It's funny. I was looking at somebody tweeted it out, and I forgot who it was. I wish I can give credit, but it was like, I think it was like the top 12 or 15 scorers in the NFL in terms of fantasy, among all positions, and it was only quarterbacks, wide receivers. It was only quarterbacks and wide receivers in the list, not one running back.
Yeah, it feels weird. Because
it does feel weird.
These are the guys you drafted, first, second, third, fourth, fifth overall to be the engine of your fantasy team, and they've been kind of I don't want to say mediocre, but they've been kind of not spectacular. You know what I mean?
100%. Yeah, no, for sure. So yeah, it's interesting, man. It's interesting, and we'll see. who kind of starts to stand out over the next couple of weeks.
I think the thing to look at for that is usage. And you talk about Christian McCaffrey, that's
Yes.
why he's at one, makes total sense. I think Dalvin Cook, has a chance to
Yes,
really.
Dalvin. See, that's why Dalvin Cook. He was a buy low. If you saw my buy low post yesterday, like guys, Dalvin Cook's usage is incredible, and it's exactly what you're looking for when it comes to a fantasy running back. He
Yeah.
is 73% route participation. It's like the dude is going to put up some monster fantasy days. So if you're looking for a high end RB1, you got to go try to get Dalvin Cook and put up a package together to get him, because he is, he's somebody that you can buy right now.
Yeah.
Obviously, Jonathan Taylor is going to be fine. Saquon Barkley, he's going to be fine as well. He got a ton of opportunity last week. He didn't get in the end zone or anything like that, but he's very involved in the passing game. He's obviously very involved in the rushing game as well. He's going to be just fine. I would start him as a top 5 running back this week.
Definitely.
Yeah. DeAndre Swift, we talked about him. I think he kind of comes back this week. He didn't have. I don't think he had his full role in week 2.
No.
Going into week 3 though, it seems like he should be fine. There was a report about him feeling better, so that's good.
Yeah. We saw
So I think going into this week, I'll have full confidence in DeAndre Swift to be a high end RB1.
Yeah, DeAndre Swift has kind of been the guy I trust the most, in fantasy so far these first 2 weeks. Even with the limited snaps that he did play last week, he still put up a respectable performance. He got in the end zone, and he actually caught a couple balls too. So I think
he was still making big plays.
Yeah, 16 or 17 points. It didn't look like it was hampering him that much. The first week obviously was great, and he has a really good matchup this week against Minnesota. What's going to be a high scoring game, I think. He's had 2 big runs in 2 games. So like, I know that's not necessarily the most sustainable thing, but it's nice to see that he's making those big plays that we really wanted him to. He's been one of the guys that are exceeding expectations, I think, and positives. It's been a really good thing to see from fantasy perspective.
Yeah, and we talked about Dalvin Cook, going up against the Lions too in this matchup, and the Lions have allowed the most fantasy points to running backs so far this season. So that should be fun to watch. Now the Jets have also allowed a ton of fantasy points to running backs so far over 2 weeks. So Joe Mixon, should be able to get it done this week against the Jets. We have Leonard Fournette, against Green Bay, and like you mentioned, with all these wide receivers banged up, we could see Tom Brady pepper Fournette in the pass game, and that'd be very welcome after a down game last week. He's another guy that I would be kind of going after in trades, because we haven't seen what his ceiling looked like. I don't think he's gotten to the end zone yet, if I'm not mistaken, this season. So I would definitely be looking at Fournette as a potential option because he's going to have those top 5 weeks. And I would highly recommend going to target him. He hasn't been peppered in the passing game either. Like only 2 targets in week 1. 4 targets last week. He hasn't gone over 10 yards receiving in either game. So Gio Bernard is on IR now. Obviously Rashad White's going to be involved, but Leonard Fournette, man, I would go after him. If you can. If you don't have him on your team, and if you have him on your team, don't worry about him. He's going to be just fine. He's still he's close to a high end RB1, mid RB1. But if you don't have him, I would try to go after him in a trade.
Yeah, I view this as the week for him to explode. You know what I'm saying? Because it's gonna be, they're playing against the Packers defense too, which is actually very good. Tom Brady's probably gonna be checking it down a lot. I wouldn't be surprised if Leonard Fournette got 6 or 7 catches this week, and that'll be enough to power him to an RB1 performance. And the other thing, you said about him not getting in the end zone, he actually did put out a tweet. He said, "To my fantasy managers, don't worry, touchdowns are coming." So
there you go. That's
take that for what you will. But he says the touchdowns are coming, so I think that he's going to be just fine. And like I said, people might be panicking on him. Take advantage of that. It's funny because these first few weeks, nobody knows what to expect. So if you see things that you like, you can go after them and get them pretty cheap. Because even though it's been 2 weeks now, if a player has an up game and a down game, nobody knows for sure what's going to happen. So they might just, either they give the player the benefit of the doubt if it's someone like Dalvin Cook, or maybe Leonard Fournette, someone that they drafted relatively low and they weren't sure about how they were going to perform. And it's been that type of year so far for Leonard Fournette. He hasn't gotten in the end zone. They might be ready to sell. So take advantage of that hair trigger.
100%, man. And look at the usage, right? And
Yeah.
and when you look at the usage, right, that is so much more sticky than how they finished over the first 2 weeks of the season. Take advantage. Take advantage of guys like Dalvin Cook and Leonard Fournette. If you look at Leonard Fournette, 87% of snaps in week 2. All right, that's absolutely ridiculous. He ran around on 70% of Tom Brady's dropbacks. You know what I'm saying? Like, this is the type of player that you want to have on your fantasy team. I don't even think they had any snaps within the 5-yard line this year so far. So that's going to change when these wide receivers start coming back and this offense finds its groove. You want running backs who are going to get you to the promised land second half of the year. Leonard Fournette's going to be that dude.
Yeah, definitely.
All right. Next, who do we have? We have Alvin Kamara looking like he's going to play this week at Carolina. He's another guy, who you could potentially go after. The morale is low for Alvin Kamara managers right now because in week 1, the usage wasn't great. He didn't have a lot of production either. And then week 2, he was out, with that injury. So, it's a rib injury. Nothing too crazy. It's not like he had a foot injury or a knee injury, a lower body injury or a soft tissue injury. Like, he's going to be fine. Right.
Yeah.
So, Alvin Kamara, I wouldn't worry about him at all. Put him in your lineup, trade for him. He's going to be good. The offense is going to be better than we've seen so far. And this is an offense that could have some fireworks later on in the year once they get their footing. Once Chris Olave, kind of, gets his game going. Once Michael Thomas is fully in his groove, back after playing, after in like 2 years, right?
Yeah.
So there's a lot. Jameis Winston, almost also missing a year, right? Doing that ACL rehab for the entire year. So this team is going to gel and they're going to be fine. So Alvin Kamara, he's in my top 10 as well. You got Nick Chubb at 9 against Pittsburgh. We talked about him. He's in my top 10 this week, just because I think that he's going to get a ton of volume against Pittsburgh, despite, Pittsburgh is a good defense, but I do think he's going to get a lot of volume in this game, as long as Jacoby Brissett doesn't make any crazy mistakes and throws it, to make a Fitzpatrick or anything like that. I think this game's going to be relatively close.
Yeah.
Derrick Henry at number 10. Derrick Henry, man, is it time to panic with Derrick Henry? I wasn't expecting him to ever be ranking him at number 10, right? So I have him at number 10 this week, and he's healthy. So why? Why do I have him at number 10 here? Is this a situation where we're looking at Henry as somebody who, number 1, is not on a good offense, but number 2, possibly losing a step?
Yeah, you hate to say that he's losing a step because yeah, we know what he can. We know what he can be. That's the problem. We've seen it so many times, and it could just be a slow start to the season. At this point, it's only 2 weeks.
He did play Buffalo last week, right? So obviously, very, very tough matchup in Buffalo. Keyed in on Derrick Henry as you would, because who else are you going to key in on? On the Tennessee offense.
Right. Yeah, that's 100% true. I'm not panicking on him yet, but I'm definitely disappointed if I'm a Derrick Henry fantasy manager right now. He did score a touchdown, and that's literally all he did last week. And, you can't really call it salvaging a performance because he had 2 straight 8-point performances, which is not at all what we want to see.
He had 8 points with a touchdown.
Yeah. It was just disgusting. He had 12 yards. I think it was like 12 carries for 12 yards and a touchdown. It was just like disgusting. So that was alarming, much more alarming even than the 8 points he's put up the first week, because even then he had 24 carries for 82 yards, and that was more Derrick Henry-esque. It's worrying. If he has a bad outing against the Raiders, who's actually a very good matchup for him, then I'd panic. But I think he's going to get back to Derrick Henry things this week.
I hope so. But, as you can see here, like, I can't rank Derrick Henry over these guys that I have here.
No, you can't.
You know what I'm saying? I can't. All these guys have better usage. They look better, right? They're on better offenses. So this is a situation where, and this is part of the reason why I didn't want to draft Derrick Henry, and I'm not trying to take a victory lap or anything like that. And it's way too early to take any victory laps. It's only 2 weeks, because Derrick Henry can come out in week 3 against the Raiders and put up 170 yards and 2 touchdowns. Like, it can happen. But we'll see. I hope that's the case for everybody who did draft Derrick Henry. I'm not trying to say I told you so or anything like that. I hope that Derrick Henry does his thing, because he's a fun player to watch, and I want to see him succeed, and I want to see all the people who drafted him. I want this to be as competitive as possible, right? That's the whole point. But yeah, so it's not looking great right now. But at the same time, if you have him, you know, he's
You
going to
know,
be in your lineup.
it's easy to hold on to the optimism. I think it's much easier to hold on to the optimism than get, stuck with the pessimism surrounding him. But it is worth mentioning that he just doesn't look exactly the same running. And
He
you don't
doesn't.
want to chalk it up to that first week where he just got blown up for the first time
Yeah,
probably in his career. You know what
right.
I mean? And that one play where he just got
It's
destroyed.
usually him dishing out the punishment
Yeah,
opposed
so
to the
he
other way
got
around.
he got a taste of his own medicine. You don't want to chalk it up to that, but that is kind of interesting to see, because he is kind of he's at that point in his career where running backs typically tend to lose a step, and we're kind of seeing, signs of that. I'm not in panic mode yet.
I'm not either. Now I have we're looking at 11 through 20 right now. I have James Conner at number 11, Austin Eckler at number 12. Now, this might be a little bit low for Austin Eckler. And maybe I should be putting Austin Eckler above Derrick Henry here, at number 10, and
Yeah,
over James Conner. I think that's what I might do because I'm looking at it now. I'm just like, what was I thinking? But the thing with Austin Eckler, like, is he didn't do shit until late in that game in week
yeah,
2. And that's because they were in desperation mode and they were in hurry up mode. And all of his fantasy points came on that last drive. And Sonny Michel, and these other running backs are super involved. Josh Kelly, very involved in this game, a lot more than we thought, running a lot of routes, getting a bunch of the carries.
right.
Not ideal for
No.
Austin Eckler right now. So he's still an RB1, but he's a low end RB1 for me this week.
And we had a long talk about Austin Eckler last week coming off the game against the Chiefs, how his production was completely game script dependent. Against Jacksonville, I think it could be completely game script dependent again. I anticipate the Chargers going up in this game very fast. I'm not sure if the Jaguars, I mean, they did look good against the Colts, but the Colts don't look good at all. I don't know how well this Jacksonville offense is going to be able to keep up with the Chargers offense. If the Chargers will go up at all, Austin Eckler might not be needed in the passing game. And they definitely don't want to run him, into the dirt, trying to grind time off the clock because we know Austin Eckler, he's not injury prone, but we've seen him get injured before. You don't want to give him too much of a workload at this point. He is a little bit older. I could see Austin Eckler kind of being game scripted out of this one if they would get up. Now, if Austin Eckler is doing the scoring to get them up, that's a different story. But so far, it's looked like he doesn't have the role that he had last season, and that he's not going to be one doing the scoring. It might be Mike Williams. It might be through the air. It might be Justin Herbert more than anybody else.
Yeah. Now I have James Conner at number 11, right before Eckler. I'm assuming that Conner plays this week.
Yeah.
And part of the reason why I like Conner so much is because of his usage. He is the primary, back on that offense. It's going to be a much better offense going forward. But he played on 72% of snaps in week 1. Obviously, he left the game pretty early last week. He's also running a route on 65% of dropbacks, which is great, and he got his target share. So I'm looking for him to kind of, have a lot better games moving forward. But right now might be a good time to buy James Conner. It's tough to buy James Conner when he's hurt, especially because, like, that's his MO a little bit. But you probably won't have to pay much, to be honest, because people are, panicking a little bit on James Conner. But I think he'll be fine. Going up against the Rams, not ideal, but I'm more concerned about. I'm always more concerned about pass rush with the Rams rather than them stopping the run.
Yeah, no, I hear you. I like James Conner. I don't think there's any reason to be worried about his injury so much.
It seems like a low ankle sprain. Doesn't seem to
Yeah.
be too serious. And I think it seems to me like he's going to be playing this week.
Yeah, as long as he's playing, he's worth the start because, like I said, he's kind of the guy where the Cardinals' offense goes down the end, not in the end zone, down the red zone, gets the goal line, and then it's just they feed him the carries until he gets in the end zone. He's always been a guy that gets those touchdowns like in that manner, and I think he's going to continue to do that. I think he'll be a welcome addition back in the lineup. Kyler Murray will be happy to have him. Yeah.
Now, I have Aaron Jones right after these guys at number 13. And, Aaron Jones was, one of our buy low candidates, following week 1. And it's because we were following the usage again, right?
Yeah.
And, you got to look at the fantasy points. You're like, well, that didn't look so great. But then let's look behind the curtain to see what was going on. And the reason why we wanted to buy Aaron Jones is because he was running a route on 65% of Aaron Rodgers' dropbacks. He just didn't get the targets, right? On top of that, he was still getting 60% of the snaps. So as long as he's being targeted on his routes, listen, I'll take it.
Oh yeah.
AJ Dillon might be the guy that you have to worry about, on the goal line. But Aaron Jones, like, he showed his explosive ability right last week. And as long as he gets those touches, he's going to have those type of weeks. He still had 15 carries in that game. Like, the thing is, like, the rushing share between Aaron Jones and AJ Dillon, percentage wise, was the same between week 1 and week 2.
Yeah.
Right. It just so happened that the percentage, like the amount of runs, just increased. Right. Aaron Jones ended up with 15 carries. Right. He ended up with 3 targets and 3 catches, and ended up scoring on both.
Yeah. And if you drafted Aaron Jones and AJ Dillon, this is kind of what you expected.
Yeah.
Buckle up. It's going to be more of this every single week, where one day it's AJ Dillon, the other day it's Aaron Jones.
Yeah.
Ultimately, Aaron Jones has more upside. AJ Dillon has a good floor, considering that he's playing alongside Aaron Jones. And you'll have the days where AJ Dillon outscores Aaron Jones. It'll be interesting. They're both very similar. That's why they're ranked so close. But Aaron Jones has the receiving upside more so than AJ Dillon. And I think that's going to be the difference maker. And that's why Aaron Jones is probably going to finish a lot higher, I think, than AJ Dillon. But week to week, AJ Dillon is a fine start every week if you're putting him at your flex or a desperation RB2. But I wouldn't start him expecting him to be the RB1 over Aaron Jones every week. Aaron Jones, I'm happy starting him as the RB1. If he happens to have a bad week, you kind of expected that. It's okay. And if you have Aaron Jones as an RB2, even better. I think that's where he plays an ideal role on your team. If Aaron Jones can be RB2, if you pick them up late.
I have AJ Dillon at 16 here. So 16 is like a solid RB2 for AJ Dillon, and I think it's because of the offense, because of them, having to depend on that backfield. And Dillon had some serious volume last week. He just wasn't that effective on his touches. He had 18 carries in that game. He also had 3 targets as well. Now, the games where I think he ends up outscoring Aaron Jones or getting close to Aaron Jones is when he gets those goal line carries, and that's what happened in week 1, right? So he ended up having that 20-point game because of that, and he got those 5 targets too. So there's going to be he's going to have his games. He's also involved in the pass game, which is good. On a per route run basis, like he actually gets targeted because defenses don't care about looking at him, but he ends up being fine. Now, Javonte Williams, I have him here at number 14. His snap share actually increased a little bit from 58% to 65% from week 1 to week 2. He didn't get peppered, in the pass game like he did in week 1, but he's still running a route on most of Russell Wilson's dropbacks, so those targets should be there. Melvin Gordon not really involved in the passing game at all, so that's good news for Javonte. So Javonte Williams, that 65% share of what we were hoping for is there. But, as his offense gets better, we should see Javonte, kind of start to do his thing even more. And we're going to see that ceiling come at some point because we know that he has the talent.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's why I like Javonte Williams for his upside. You can keep starting him as your RB2 because every week he has the upside. It's just that the offense has been, oddly bad. So we'll be okay. Javonte Williams, you can put him in your lineup, no problem. I'm not worried about Melvin Gordon. He has the usage, like you said, 65% is kind of what we had him pegged at, as far as his usage goes over the offseason. And we said we would have been happy with that. And I am happy with that. 65%. That's enough touches for me to be like, okay, he has the upside to be an RB1 each week. He just needs to, put it together.
Yeah, right. Josh is saying here, if Herbert is banged up, he might be doing more touchdowns than normal to Eckler. And that's a good point. We could see some of that Eckler kind of more involved because, we might not see Herbert be throwing the ball, chucking the ball downfield as much.
It's true. But I do pose you that after that first time that, everyone saw it on Thursday night where Herbert could hardly get it 5 yards out of his hand to throw it out of bounds. And then the next play he turns around and throws a 20-yard strike to DeAndre Carter. I pose you that. And then you could tell me if he's not going to be throwing downfield. I think, it's true. Austin Eckler could get a couple more targets than normal, but I don't think Herbert's going to change the way he plays because of an injury. As long as there's no bad rib injections like Tyrod Taylor-esque, even though it is the same doctor that did that, Herbert will be fine.
So I have Josh Jacobs right here at number 17, and this might be the highest I ever have him. I usually have him lower, like close, like a low end RB2, but he did see 72% of the snaps last week. He's getting all the rushing attempts.
Yeah.
And he's running a route close to 50% like last week he did. So the volume for Josh Jacobs is going to be there. He's on a good offense, and those goal line touchdowns that we were kind of depending on, it hasn't come yet.
Yeah.
So we could see some big games coming out of coming from Josh Jacobs at some point.
And that's the funny thing, because I played against Josh Jacobs last week, and I was like, oh, I'm not sweating it. This guy's not going to get the majority of the carries. And then all of a sudden, he's Mr. Usage in week 2. And he has like all these carries. And like he wasn't terribly effective or efficient with those carries. But, he had the usage. And like we keep preaching, usage. So I think Josh Jacobs at 17, it's good. Tennessee isn't a very good defense. So we'll see how he turns out. But I think 17's fair.
Yeah. Of course, we have Elijah Mitchell again at 18, who's not playing. He's out. He's out of this game. It's Jeff Wilson. Jeff Wilson's supposed to be there at number 18. What's that saying? Fool me once, something something. Fool me twice, something something, and then something something else. I have no idea what that saying is, but something like that. But yeah, Jeff Wilson at number 18. Jeff Wilson actually ended up being pretty solid last week. It was Tyrion Davis-Price as his backup, right? Which was a surprise to me. But he had a high ankle sprain. So moving forward, it's looking like Jeff Wilson's going to be the guy, as long as he can stay healthy. And he was relatively effective on his touches, as well. So, I'm looking at Jeff Wilson like a solid RB2 this week. Out of all of these backs, like right here, like in this entire range, seems to me like Jeff Wilson, can potentially hit 20 carries relatively easily against Denver. Unless Denver magically finds their groove. But I can totally see that. They have a good offensive line, good scheme. I think he'll be fine. And there's less of a chance of a running back kind of taking over, this week coming up.
Yeah.
We got Antonio Gibson at number 9. Oh, I'm sorry, man. Did you have something to say?
Yeah, no, it's I was just going to say, Jeff Wilson, he didn't score a touchdown, but he did have 84 yards on the ground. So a touchdown would make a big difference in production from what he had. He would move from flex to serviceable RB2 if he could just get in the end zone.
Yeah. Oh, I'm with you on that. And, he did have 2 targets as well. So he might be, he might get the ball a little bit in the passing game.
Right.
I have Antonio Gibson at number 19 here, going up against Philly. A little bit of a tough matchup here. But, he is the primary early down back on this offense. The offense is better than it was before. The fact that they're pass happy kind of means that, they're going to be getting the ball. He is running a lot of routes, despite him not being the primary third down back, 2-minute back, he's still running routes. So he had 8 targets in week 1. He had 4 targets in week 2. 18 opportunities last week, and if you're going to be involved in the pass game a little bit, despite him being extremely ineffective on the ground last week, he's somebody that you can start as a low end RB2, and feel okay about that. And I have David Montgomery at number 20, who's not on as good of an offense, but they run the ball a lot. And that's their identity right now. And he looked good last week, against the Packers, despite them being down. It didn't matter. The Bears, like they were down that game. They were like, all right, well, we're just going to keep running it. That's what we're going to do.
Yeah, no. Yeah, you're right. The Bears do run the ball a lot, especially as a Justin Fields fantasy owner when he only throws it, was it 11 times or something like that? It's just like, But Montgomery's fine. I like that. Antonio Gibson, as long as Brian Robinson isn't playing, he'll be fine. Once Brian Robinson comes back, it'll be interesting to see how Gibson's used. But for now, just take advantage of the usage.
Yeah. I'm going to run through, 11 through 20 here. Let's see. We have
21 through 30. Is that it?
21
right?
through 30. Sorry. Yeah, exactly. So I got at 21, we have Kareem Hunt, followed by Clyde Edwards-Helaire, followed by Cordell Patterson, Miles Sanders, James Robinson, Zeke Elliott, Dameon Pierce, Darrell Henderson, Tony Pollard, and Michael Carter. Just real quick about Clyde Edwards-Helaire, I would have him higher if the usage matched his production, and it doesn't. He's like the overall RB6 on the year right now. He's somebody that I want to sell because of that. He's on a good offense, but he's still sharing a lot of that work. He's not even the primary, goal line guy right now, right? Last week we saw Jerick McKinnon in on those snaps instead of Clyde Edwards-Helaire. So,
right,
somebody I'm looking to sell, don't be surprised if he ends up outside the top 24, any given week because of that, right?
Yeah.
Just keep that in mind.
It does help that he's been on a good offense, and it's been high-scoring games they've been in the past 2 weeks. Not that I don't think that Chiefs games are going to be high scoring, but he's benefited a lot from just being on a good offense. If he was on any other offense, the usage would just be like rough.
Yeah,
But I
it'd be
wouldn't be
really bad.
surprised to see it take a dip.
Yeah, James Robinson at 25. He had a ton of volume last week, but that was because they were up in the Colts and they shut them out, right?
Yeah.
So this week going up against the Chargers, a little different situation. We could see more Travis Etienne this week because he's playing that role of the hurry up guy, the 2-minute offense, and the passing down back. We might not see James Robinson be able to get a ton of carries in this game. Is this too low for you, or is this appropriate?
I think James Robinson's fine there. I wouldn't be opposed to having ETN ranked above him this week, just because, like you said, it's going to be the Chargers, and if they go down, ETN's probably going to be getting passing work. And it's just awesome to see, even though ETN isn't getting the workload, but every time he gets the ball, like, he's so quick and shifty. You just when you see him, he makes you happy watching him play. It's just, if he could get the ball a little bit more, he could be a humongous.
If he gets the ball a little bit more, that'll make me happier. For sure.
Well, yeah, definitely. But just watching him, he has the look of a dynamic fantasy running back.
We might be getting close to Dameon Pierce taking over this Texans backfield.
Yeah.
We saw a little bit of that last week. A lot of it flip-flopped. Last week it was a neutral game script, surprisingly in that game. So Dameon Pierce, is looking like somebody that, can potentially move up in ranks, as the weeks go by. What did you make of the Tony Pollard usage last week? When he was on the field, he was being targeted a ton by Cooper Rush. Is that something that you think continues? Because when he had the ball in his hands, obviously he was looking electric.
I think it does continue, and I think that the split between Ezekiel Elliott and Tony Pollard is going to be very close to 50-50. Ezekiel Elliott just, he's a running back. That's what he does. He runs the ball. He isn't really catching the ball much. Cooper Rush doesn't check it down to Zeke as much as he does, say, Pollard. And Pollard is much more explosive than Zeke at this point. That's evidenced by Zeke. I don't think he has a touchdown yet. The Cowboys' offense being as, bad as it is right now, it's hurting Ezekiel Elliott. But even if Dak comes back and the offense looks better, I think Tony Pollard's the guy to have. Zeke has, you want to say he has a floor, but the only floor he has is getting 10 carries, and that's about it. So, unless things drastically change, I'd actually put Pollard above Zeke at this point. I would.
Spicy.
Because
I like it.
He has the receiving upside. And it's a very similar situation where, and you don't want to compare him to Aaron Jones and A.J. Dillon, but Zeke seems to be limited exclusively to the ground game. He doesn't seem to have much through the air. Tony Pollard seems to be a guy through the air. If they're designing jet sweeps or anything, any gadget plays, it's going to Pollard. I like Pollard more than Zeke.
Yeah. Pollard was targeted on more than 50% of his routes run last week. So he's definitely favored there. Now, I think that'll do it for now. I just want to let you guys know, Underdog Fantasy, if you're not playing with them yet, tonight is a great time. Today's a great time to start for tonight's game. They have a bunch of over-unders that you can choose, and you can win some money, if you get a bunch of those over-unders right, a bunch of multipliers there. If you get 5 of those picks right, you end up 20xing whatever money you put in. So if you use the code Upper Hand on Underdog Fantasy, you would actually double your deposit up to $100. So make sure you take advantage of that. I appreciate everybody here. The link to Underdog is in the description here for the YouTube and also in the podcast as well. So appreciate you guys. I'm glad to be back here. We'll be back tomorrow with the wide receiver and tight end rankings going into the weekend. Appreciate you guys. If you need the full rankings, they're going to be up on the Patreon page later today. Thank you guys. See you later. Peace.